team, and I support the Smart Solutions team with John, who was on the call earlier. Um, and Jake Simons with our solution consulting team, a learning consultant, and he's stepped in for RA. He had a family emergency, so we greatly appreciate Jake you hopping in and helping us out. And we want this to be interactive, so please kind of stop and ask any questions, and so we can get a full understanding. And if there's any follow-ups, we're certainly any follow-up questions, we're glad to help out with that as well. So without further ado, Jake, I'll turn it over to you so we can use everybody's time most effectively.
All right. Thank you very much. And to echo what Matt said, as we go through this, please keep it interactive. Any comments, questions, concerns, either you can speak up and we can discuss them, or one of us will be watching the chat feature and we can hopefully address any questions that do come up. But just to begin with, my name is Jake Simon. I come from the training and education world here at Infor. So my tenure with the company has really been focused on the people side of our customer organizations. Everything from project team training through sites like Infor Campus, all the way to the other end of that spectrum with regards to change management and ultimately end user adoption, which is what we're going to be focused on here today. So we really basically kind of used our marketing message as the name of this solution. So it is exactly like it sounds. This is a platform to enable end users to quickly adopt new software. And we're going to focus the conversation on your Infor applications and your Infor suite of products. But in the back of your head, just keep in mind that this product is what we consider to be product agnostic, meaning that it will work with your Infor applications obviously really well, but this is also something that you can leverage across other applications, Infor, non-Infor, web-based, Windows-based, really anything with a graphical user interface. You'll be able to use UAP to document and build out process-oriented training material based on a very simple recording process. So with that said, I'm going to take you through a few PowerPoint slides and I'll go through them as quickly as I can. But just to introduce what UAP is, a couple of the challenges that it helps address. And then we will jump into the actual demo itself. So we'll look at it from a couple of different perspectives. We'll start with an end user perspective. So we will click into CloudSuite Financials. We'll get deep into the system and we'll show what UAP is doing for me as an end user. And then we'll sort of reverse engineer it from there. So we'll start with looking at the finished product, and then we'll talk about how we get it to that point. And to do that, we'll actually turn the recorder on. We'll record a few steps in a demo system that we've got queued up. And then we'll show how you edit that recording, how you publish that recording into all of these really great usable pieces of training content. So to begin with, I always start these presentations off just preaching a little bit about why it's important to invest in your people. So you're making this really awesome investment in this really great technology, but when the people behind that technology don't have the tools and resources they need, that's when things get challenging from a change management or a user acceptance perspective. So the statistic that sticks out to everybody here on the screen is that third one in from the left, in that the number one reason for failed implementations is due to a lack of end user adoption. And what this really says, again, is not that the technology is a bad fit or the technology is broken and it's not working, but rather the people behind that technology don't feel comfortable. They're not adopting it at a steady rate, and therefore it puts that whole project at risk. Another challenge here that I think everybody can personally relate to is that an end user will typically run into a problem on average 6 times before they reach out and ask for help. And there's a few problems with that statement alone. Number one is the the level of frustration that that person is ultimately going to experience. If you run into a problem over and over and over again, you're going to be frustrated. You're not going to have a good experience or a good view of that new process, that new system. And that's something that we want to mitigate right out of the gates. The last thing we want for new users is to be frustrated and not feel confident in the system. The second problem with this statement then is the time that it takes for that person to ultimately find the answer that they're looking for. So it takes time to experience that problem over and over again. And then in the past, without a solution like UAP, their go forward would be to maybe navigate to a SharePoint site and search for this answer. They could go to an LMS, a learning management system, and maybe find the answer that they're looking for there. Or they tap their CubeMate on the shoulder and they ask how they have done things in the past. Or worse yet, they pick up the phone and they call the IT help desk. And these are questions that always start with, how do I? How do I put my time in the PTO calendar? How do I create a purchase order? Simple procedural questions that something like UAP can address at that point of need. And we'll see how it does that here in a little bit. Another thing to think about when you're considering training adult learners is how quickly we'll actually lose information. And so the graph here really highlights over time the percentage of knowledge that we lose as time goes on. So at the beginning of that timeline, you have your initial training session, and just 20 minutes later, we've already lost about 40% of what we learned just 20 minutes ago. And fast forward that to a week later or a month later, and now we're just down to about 20% of what we originally learned in that training session. So what this is really focused on is that training is not just this one-time thing that happens at go live and everybody's trained and now everybody knows everything. Training is something that happens, it's reinforced over time. It continually happens on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, as you're in there learning new processes, learning new systems, and trying to find ways to be efficient. And so this again becomes critically important in how we distribute training material, not just around go live and not just for end user training purposes, but also for end user support when those people are back at their desk trying to do their job. So how does UAP fit into all of this? Oh, I'm sorry, did I hear a question? Okay. UAP, really, we look at UAP in kind of two different buckets. Number one is the ability to easily create training material. And UAP works through a parent-child file formatting. So from one parent document, which would be your recording, and we'll do a recording here in a little bit, you can publish that into up to 16 different media styles or training outputs. And these include things like simulations and MP4 videos and PowerPoints and job aids and cue cards and test scripts, etc. And so that's number one, is the ability to easily document those processes and turn that documentation into high quality training material. The second piece of value here from a UAP perspective is through what we call context sensitive help or in-application help. And so once you've created that content, UAP allows you to distribute that content in a variety of ways. One is through context sensitive help. So as the users are clicking around inside of your production environment and they get stuck and they forget what they're supposed to be doing, UAP will be right there in the top right-hand corner of the screen, and it will provide them that step-by-step guidance to help them through those problem areas or any questions that they have. Another way to distribute content is through the UAP Learning Library. And this is basically a website where you get to organize and display all your material for your end users in different projects and folders and subfolders. And we'll also see that live here in a little bit. Do you guys use a learning management system, an LMS? Does that ring a bell at all?
I'm thinking, Julia, do you know? We don't have it in the, we don't use it in the treasury, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's part of the scope of that new HR MIS
Okay.
solution.
Okay, perfect.
It will be part of that.
I know.
All right.
Yes, they got some way to get help. I'm not sure what they do.
Okay. So yeah, so the way that UAP works alongside of a learning management system is the LMS basically acts as the front door for your end users. So that's where they'll come in. That's where you will assign curriculum and learning paths to the individuals. You'll put due dates on it. You'll track their progress as they work through those curriculum or learning paths. But at the beginning of that, all of your material is being developed in UAP, stored and maintained in UAP, but it integrates to the LMS through what we call Scorum packaging. So just know that UAP works alongside the LMS. It's very common to use both in tandem. That's the way we do it here at Infor as well internally. So when the time comes to look more deeply at the LMS feature, we'd be glad to get into more details about that. I already talked a little bit about the learning library, and we'll see that live here, so I'll skip this one. Infor Smart Help. Smart Help is Infor's own version of in-application help. So this is an application that we have built right into the Mingle Infor OS framework. It's part of what we call a context app or a contextual app. And so we'll also see this live here in a minute. But Smart Help is basically the portal that connects your production ERP to your UAP learning library. So as you start to build out recordings and you create documents and videos to live in the learning library, Smart Help is what basically follows that user around inside of your production server. It knows who I am as a user, and it knows where I am. It knows which page I'm looking at. And so that when I ask Smart Help for help, I say, I remember how to get here, but I don't remember what to do next. I click on Smart Help, and it will look into that learning library and pull back all the relevant pieces of content related to the page that I'm looking at. So this is what we consider to be that context sensitive help or in-application help. Now, I started the discussion today talking about how UAP is flexible, and you can use UAP in Infor as well as non-Infor. And so obviously outside of Infor, you won't have the Smart Help application available outside of the Mingle Infor OS framework. So in that case, we do have a browser plugin, which is an option that you can use either with Infor or with these other non-Infor applications. It does the same thing as Smart Help. It's just a second option that is a little bit more flexible that allows you to deploy it to basically any website that you might be using. And then the last slide here just kind of hits home on some of the measurable value that our existing customers have experienced through UAP, both from a content development perspective, so the ability to record the system and then publish those recordings into different outputs, but also from a user perspective, more efficient end users, and ultimately a reduction in those help desk calls. And we've seen customers with up to a 40% reduction in help desk calls. Again, usually they're starting with some sort of how do I question. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the PowerPoint here, and I'm going to get my CloudSuite finance system spun up. Any questions so far as we make a transition here?
Nothing for me.
Have you guys ever used a recording software like this in the past to document business processes? Does anyone have experience with that?
No, I certainly haven't.
Okay.
IS IT normally records this session. I'm not sure what software they use.
Okay. Mhm. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do here, we're going to look at UAP inside of CloudSuite Financials, and we're going to look at it from an end user perspective. So again, we're going to kind of see it as a finished product first, and then we will backtrack and show how we get it to this point. So what we're looking at again is CloudSuite Financials. This is a generic demo system that we're assigned to. So up in the top left, you have your app switcher where you can navigate to different applications. And in the top right is this little chevron here, and that's what we call the context apps or the contextual apps. So if I open this little pop out here, one of those apps is called Smart Help. And Smart Help again is our version of in-application help. So it number one understands who I am, and it knows where I am within the application. So it's actually reading from this little string of code right here. We call it the screen ID. And through an API key, Smart Help is communicating this screen ID over to our UAP learning library. And it's telling us that there are 25 different topics in that learning library that also have this same matching screen ID. So that's a little behind the scenes of how Smart Help is working, but basically it runs on an API key, and you're telling this production environment to communicate with that UAP environment and pull back any matches that you might see. So right now we are kind of on this setup page. It's an administration page of the system. And so it's telling us that there's 25 processes that start from this point. A lot of different directions we can go from this kind of generic start page. But as we drill into the system here, you'll notice this list of 25 things will refine itself based on the screen that I end up looking at. So I'll go ahead and click the setup button here. We'll click financials. We will go into invoices. So we'll click manage invoices. And you can see Smart Help is thinking. It now says that there are 14 different topics that start from this point. I'll go ahead and close that menu. And then if we go one step further, I'll click unsubmitted. Okay, now it says that there's only one thing I should be doing from this point, and that's submit invoices for approval. So assuming that it's my third day on the job and I've had my initial training sessions, I'm now logged into the system. I remember how to get to this point, but I really don't remember what I'm supposed to be doing next. That's where I come over here to my Smart Help window, and it says here that this is the only thing that I should be doing on this page. So I'll go ahead and click this link, and that will drop me into that UAP environment, right to that specific piece of material. Okay. So a few things to note here. We have our users first land on our simulation output. So like I said earlier, there are 16 different training outputs related to the same recording. The simulation is one of those 16 outputs. It happens to be the most popular of our outputs, and that's why we choose to have our users land on that one first, but completely up to you if you want them to view the cue card or the procedure table first, completely up to you guys. I'll talk about the simulation here first, and then we'll look through some of these other outputs, which you can see listed down below. The simulation has 4 modes in it. Again, you can use all 4, or you can choose to use 1 or 2 or 3 of these different modes, but they are pretty self-explanatory. Show me is just like it sounds. We're just going to watch this action play out on the screen, and the user will just sit back and watch the different clicks as they happen. Okay, and there is audio associated with these recordings as well. So the Microsoft text to voice will read off what you're seeing in these little thought bubbles. Okay, so that is show me. And then as you go down the list, it gets more and more interactive for the user. So in guide me, just like it sounds, it will tell you what to do, but the actual end user has to make those mouse clicks and those keystrokes to get from step to step. So I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, now it's telling me that I have to click the requester role. I'll go ahead and click on it, and that's what allows us to move from step to step. If I go off script, it won't do anything. It won't let you advance. This is a great place for users to start building that muscle memory, but doing it in a safe place. Really, all they're interacting with are screenshots with hotspots built into it, but to the end user, it looks and feels like the real thing. Okay, so that's guide me. And then let me try and test me are very similar to each other in that it's not going to give me those prompts. It's not going to tell me which buttons to push or which fields to enter. It's up to the user to make those first steps on their own. If they make a mistake, it will correct you and point you in the right direction. But at the end of test me, it will record a score on how accurate you were or how many mistakes you made in that overall process. So I'll pull up, let me try. Okay, so again, it's not going to tell me what to do. It's not going to give me those prompts to start with. If I make an incorrect action, and I'll click on more over here, it says, no, that's not right. Do you need assistance? Yep. Okay, now I remember. I click on requester. And again, you're testing yourself as you go from step to step. Okay, so that is the simulation output. And then down at the bottom here, we actually allow the users to toggle between these different types of outputs. And this really benefits them in that right now we as far as we can tell, there are about 4 different generations of workers in the workforce. And that means that each one of them is going to learn a little bit differently. Some people prefer to watch videos to gather information. Some people prefer the simulation where they can get hands-on. Others just prefer to read their instructions in text. And allowing the users to pick and choose between these different media styles, make sure that they're learning in a style that is meaningful for them. So I'll click on the job aid. And in this case, we have just our basic instructions in text. Up in the top, you would have sections for navigations and description, and then the steps for the individuals to follow. You can choose to have screenshots turned on for each one of these steps. And when we create a recording, we'll turn the screenshots on so you can see what that looks like. Same thing with the procedure table here. We don't have screenshots on this instance, but when we create a procedure table in a minute, we will turn the screenshots on and you'll see steps in text here with a screenshot that you can actually expand and put back down in here. Our test script here, this is another one of those outputs available. On the top here, we have what we call sections and blocks. So we have all these standard documents and document types that we start you off with, but you can use them as is, or you can configure them to fit your needs. So on this one, we have our testing information on the top, successor transactions, test scenarios, and then down below you have the steps in line for the testers to follow. So from a UAT perspective, as you're providing these different testing scripts to your testers, you can in theory give them a simulation to try out. You can give them a video, maybe a procedure table or a job aid along with this test script. And then assuming that the test goes well and that this is going to work for them and they give you the thumbs up back, you can then easily turn this around and publish it out to the larger audience through the learning library and really anticipate in anticipation of end user training. Okay. And then over here on the bottom right, we have some collaboration pieces, if you will. So if I wanted to send this over to Matt, I could drop his email in here and it would send him an email and say, here, check out this recording. I know you had a question about submitting invoices for approval. We can also download this content and save it locally if we need to, as well as provide feedback on the content itself. Okay. Any questions so far on either the Smart Help connection or the learning library side, or the I'm sorry, the outputs?
Yeah, I do have a question. I was wondering with the let me try feature and with the testing feature, since you're working in a live environment, how does the system prevent the users from doing things that are not reversible or unintentional,
Yeah, good
affecting the live
question.
data?
So to really safeguard it, they won't be doing these steps in a live environment. The way the simulation works is it's really just a series of screenshots that the recorder will take, and then it has hotspots built into those screenshots. So in actuality, they're not even touching the live system. We actually had one customer use the acronym NTNA. No training, no access. So until his users were able to score at a proficient level in the simulation, that's when they got their logins to the actual production environment. So all of the learning happens outside of that production server.
Okay, and we can track who does what in the
Mhm.
UAP without the separate LMS.
That's correct. Yep. So it does have
Okay.
native reporting in here. And I'll pull that up here a little bit towards the end, but the reporting will pull things like do we have do my authors publishing content? Have I assigned recordings to individuals? Where are they at in that process? Have they been created, published, assigned to the website, etc.? We can also pull user data. So which pieces of content are my users looking at? How much time are they spending with this content? One of the really interesting ones is called a help request report, and it will show you where users are clicking on help the most. So which one of those screen IDs has the most smart help hits, and that will help you indicate that maybe there are some problem areas in here, or not everybody understands the invoice process, and helps you kind of narrow in on where those problem areas might lie. But we'll take a look at the reports here in a minute. Anything else? Any other questions before we move forward? Okay. Now, I'll jump all the way back here to the home page of our learning library so you can just get a feel for what that looks like. I'll close this. Over here on the left-hand side, we have all of what we call our training projects. And each one of these projects is going to have a series of folders or subfolders or just recordings inside of them. Now, I'm an administrator of the system, so I see all the projects that's going on this server. There are ways to refine what users can or can't see when they log into the learning library. So if I'm an AP clerk and I log into the site here, there are ways to make it so that all I see is the material that's relevant for my role. But as you can see, we do use this pretty extensively here at Infor. We have many projects going on, as obviously you could see here, which does speak again to the flexibility of the system. We do also start our new UAP customers off with a library of pre-built content. And we've just finished re-recording all of our CloudSuite Finance and Global HR material. So I'm going to jump over to a copy of that library. And this is basically what comes preloaded in a new UAP customer's environment. And here we have our IA content library, which has several packages of material as well. We have some sample content and then some additional content libraries down here. These ones are I think 2 years old at this point, and these ones were just created this year. So if we look specifically into the CloudSuite Finance and Global HR collection here, you can see some of the folders that we've already created and some of that pre-built content that you're welcome to take advantage of. And the way that customers really do use this material, there's a few ways. One is you can use it as is. It's ready to go right out of the box. So if these processes work for you, great. You can use them as is, or you also have the ability to modify this existing material. So if the out of the 20 steps in this recording, you guys do step number 10 a little bit differently, or you don't do step number 10. You can pull this existing recording down to your UAP editor, make a change to it, delete step number 10, add a note to step 10, whatever you need to do, and then republish it. And then therefore this generic content is going to be semi-customized to your business processes. And then the third way to really utilize these canned libraries is to use them as a structure to build out your own specific learning library. So here you can see all of the steps in billing to collections, and follow these steps, but do it in your environment and turn the UAP recorder on, record yourself following these steps. And that way, though, the end user, when they go and pick it up, it's going to be a pretty close match to what they're seeing from a data perspective, from a marketing and a branding perspective. You'll have your logo in the top left corner. You'll have your color schemes, and it will be following your specific business processes. Okay. So that's the pre-built content. I'll close this one and we'll keep this one open for now. There's also a search bar here, as you can see, and so if we maybe didn't know exactly what we were looking for, we can start to type in things like purchase order or invoice matching, and the search bar will come back with any matching content related to that keyword. We can also assign favorites if we want to keep track of one of these things. If I want to check this again in 6 months, and if I made a change to it 6 months later and I had that listed as one of my favorites, I'll get a notification that it changed and I should go back in and check it out. All right. So the next step here is to actually turn the recorder on, and we'll create a recording. But before I do that, any other questions from the end user side of things?
Maybe I can just make a quick comment here. I think I know the answer, Jake, but I want to make sure you have a chance to answer it. We didn't have a chance to have a briefing because of the last minute change, but I just wanted you to be aware that even though we've got the government on the phone here, the instance that they have in production actually has the government plus 4 other state-owned enterprises, including public housing, higher education, hospital, and the revenue authority like the IRS. So I wanted to just highlight that because, of course, their processes will be slightly different. Well, some very similar, some even more so in the case of the hospital, I suspect. So I just wanted to put that out there because I can see where you're organizing the content here, but maybe you wanted to add some comments about how you would segregate or organize it so that there's content for each organization, a total of 5.
Yeah, yeah, and that's really where, again, the flexibility of UAP comes into play. So one way to tackle that challenge would be to have sort of like a golden image or standard recording that you start with in a specific area, and then through the recording process, and the recording process is designed to be easy to use so that any one of those separate entities can take that golden image or that original recording and start making changes to it, or they can record their own business processes. So one of the nice things with UAP is the way that it's licensed. There's no difference between an end user and an author, somebody that has the ability or the rights to record new recordings. And so that means that we have customers that basically use their subject matter experts to do a lot of the original recording in here. And once they've done the recording, they pass it over to somebody in the learning department or HR or IT, and they publish it out to the learning library here for everybody else to use. So you can segregate each one of those different areas with their own project, their own folders, their own specific content. And then through the user groups on the back end here, we can actually refine what, based on where that person reports to or what their role is, which organization they're working for, they would only see the folders relevant to their site. So it works really well with multi-site, multi-organizational types of customers. And again, allows them to really put their own stamp on the training material versus having to rely on some generic content that's maybe coming from one group or another group. Does that make sense? Did that help answer the question?
Yep, it did.
Okay. And is there a multi-language requirement, or is there primarily
No,
one language?
all English.
All English, okay. And the reason I say that is it does have the ability to translate content as well. So there are 32 different languages available for translation here. I'll go ahead and close the learning library, and I'm going to get my demo system reset here. We'll go back to the home page, close all these, and we will turn the recorder on, and we'll do some content development. Okay, so I'll get that squared away. And to do the recording, each author would download the UAP client to their local machine. As far as the end users go, all they need is access to a web browser, and they can get in and interact with and consume that material. But the authors would download the recording and the editing software. That's what I just clicked on here is my UAP client. And from this point, we can start from scratch. We could open up one that we had maybe started and haven't finished yet, or we can pull down content from the server. Again, if we wanted to make a change to maybe that generic material, this is how we would do that. Another good practice is to go back and check content over time. So there are things like expiration dates that we can put on this material. After 12 months, I get a notification that a year has gone by. I might want to go back in and make sure that that recording is still relevant. If I needed to make a change to it, I would click open from server. It would pull down that recording I did a year ago, and I could start editing to that, republish it, and then all of those outputs that we had, the simulations, the cue cards, the job aids, those would all have that same edit reflected in it. So it is considered to be a single source editing piece. But we were going to start from scratch, so I'll hit new. And it will ask me to pick a project and give it a file name. And then over here, it wants me to select a template. We just have one template for the project that I have selected, but you can have multiple templates as well. The template is what governs the look and feel of your outputs. So this is where you will make decisions about which types of outputs do we want to use, what do we want those documents to look like, what sort of branding do we want to put in here? Do we want the logo? Do we want our color schemes throughout these documents? All of those decisions get built into the template. And so regardless of who ultimately does the recording, if they're using the same template, it will all have that same look and feel to it. I'll go ahead and click OK. And it's telling me that my screen resolution does not match the optimal resolution. So when another decision that goes into that template is what are our screen resolution, what should be the optimal resolution. It's not critical for this case. I'm going to skip through it. And then the next thing that will pop up here is the recorder itself. The recorder is pretty basic. There's a record button, a pause, a stop, undo, a redo button. It's not a real-time recorder, and that it's watching you in real time or watching all the extracurricular mouse activity. It's only going to record the actions I make. So the mouse clicks and the keystrokes going forward. And each time I do one of those actions, each time I make a mouse click or a keystroke, it's going to take a screenshot of that action. It will insert the steps in text. And then once we're done recording, we will go step by step, screen by screen, and make any changes, make any edits or notes or context, things like that. So here's the recorder. Like I said, pretty basic. This will stay put on the screen as we click around in here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit record. We'll wait for it to say recording down here. And the recorder will do a pretty good job of keeping up with you as you're clicking. Now, you do want to be very deliberate with your actions. Obviously, it is recording, so we want to reduce the number of mistakes we make, the extra clicks that we're making. But it will keep up with you as you'll see. Now, as I start to click, you'll notice the steps will list themselves out here. So we'll stick with the invoice example here. We'll click on financials. We will click on payables, payables processing, manage invoices, close that. Keyword search here, we'll just do a few steps just to get an idea of the recording aspect here. Again, I'm not going to do a whole invoice process. For this one, I'll use the tab button. You can see how it grabbed that the keystroke versus the mouse click. We will do equals and they're probably not going to let me type in there. That's okay. So if we wanted, again, now if we made a mistake here, again, it's not going to let me just type in data here. We can easily redo that and get rid of that button or rid of that step. We'll go down here to currency. We'll do a lookup. We'll do the Argentine peso since they're having a good week. We'll pick an invoice date. We'll say Christmas. Okay, and then assuming that was the whole process, if that's the 18 steps that we needed to record, we're happy with it. That's as far as we want to go. We come up here and we hit stop. And that will completely stop the recording. And what it's doing now is taking all of the screenshots that it took and giving it to us in order in our UAP editor. And this is now where we get to go screen by screen, step by step, and start making changes to it, add color, add context, a lot of things we can do from an editing perspective. But the editing is very visual at the end of the day. So as you can see here, we can just easily move things around. I can click in here and change that text. So I'm going to say click the setup button instead of the toggle navigation. And we just now go screen by screen. We make sure that it's all accurate. Again, if we needed to resize things or move them around, very simple to do, very visual. You don't need to be a developer or a coder to do any of this. We can double click in here and get detailed action properties. So we can change this from a left click to right click or a double click. We can mess around with how quickly these hotspots will display and disappear. So maybe we want to start everyone off with a little note. We can do insert a note. And we'll say before you begin, go to, and then we can drop a deep link here. We can insert a link for maybe a video, as a safety video that you need them to watch, or you want them to navigate out to another piece of content, or this is a great way to also start branching material. So if one site does things a little bit differently, you can say if you are in the hospital division, click here, and this is going to take you out to that specific piece of content, etc. So it's another good way to branch users off of the original recording. But as you can see, it will do a pretty good job from an accuracy perspective. It knows where I'm clicking, it knows what I'm clicking on. Here's where we did a little bit of data entry. So we typed info in this case. I can change that from exact text to free text. So if you're showing people how to log into the system, I don't want them using my username and my password. I'll say you enter your username, and then we'll change that to free text or regular expression. We can say it has to include @infor.com in order to be acceptable if we're doing email addresses. Okay, but again, we just go screen by screen. It does have an automatic voice associated, so the Microsoft voice will read what's in these little thought bubbles here, or we can also do our own voices too. So it's pretty common at the beginning of a recording to give the users a little audio note before the steps really kick off. You can add a voiceover here, either an MP3 file, or you can record right through the system. But once we're happy with it, it picked everything up. We've double checked it. It's accurate. This is what we want to publish. We come up here to File, and we can check this material in, and that would put it out on that server where we can then publish it out to the learning library. Or we can publish it locally. So I'll click Publish, Publish Current. And this is now where we get to pick and choose between all those different outputs. So we have our simulation. There's the 4 modes of the simulation. We'll just do show me and test me for now. It does take a couple minutes to publish everything, so we'll just leave a few of these selected. We'll do the job aid, the procedure table, the test script, and we'll leave it at that for time's sake. We'll hit publish, and then we'll get to see what we just created. So any questions on the recording side of it? Is this something you think you could ultimately take advantage of from a content development perspective?
Yeah, definitely. This is very cool, I would say.
Thank you. Yeah, and it really can, at the end of the day, become that workforce multiplier. When you're thinking about creating training material or just documenting the system, it's a daunting task. And a lot of customers will do screenshots in Word documents, and those documents ultimately go out to a SharePoint site. And are they really being used? We have a hard time knowing. This system allows you to really digitize that training material from a documentation standpoint all the way through to actual videos and training material. So again, it allows you to digitize that material and then distribute it out to those different groups. And then as time goes on, you can come back here, make changes to it, make edits to it, keep it up to date, keep it relevant. And it ensures that the users are learning from actual relevant material. We don't want people playing the telephone game. We don't want to pick up Matt's bad habits if I have to go ask Matt for a question. And we don't want to be wasting the IT department's time with how do I questions. So here's the summary. Here's our simulation. Those are the two modes that we selected. There's a little note we put in there. Now, if I had changed my screen resolution when it told me to, this would fit the window a lot better and we wouldn't need to scroll. And let's stop that one. And then the test me output. Here is the job aid with the screenshots turned on. So here we've got our instructions and text, and then the visual screenshot of that step. Procedure table, very similar again, but here we can actually toggle through these screenshots and also get the instructions down below. And our test script. Okay, so we covered the end user side of things. As we're clicking around in there, Smart helps following us around, making sure that we've got quick, easy access to this material. We looked at the recording and editing side of the process. So how do we get recordings built? How do we edit those recordings? Now we could obviously go into a lot more detail from the editing perspective. And then the last thing that we'll do here is we'll jump into the back end of that server, which would be more of an administration view. So these are where you're going to find those reports. We have about 9 canned reports that come with the system, but you can also create your own custom reports. So you can get an idea of the types of reports that are available. Here's that one I talked about. Yeah. This is also where you're going to set up things like your in-application help profiles. So here on the gear wheel, we have our users set up. We have different authentication methods, so we can use whatever single sign-on provider you might be using. We can automatically assign those users to different roles or groups within the system here, which ultimately determines what those people can or can't see. Here is some of the integrations here. So if we wanted to add this to Salesforce.com, this is where we would come to create that help connection profile, as well as our LMS integrations. Okay. And then just a real high level view of each one of these projects, where they're at, and what exactly is going on with that content. So this speaks a little bit more to the content management side of UAP. We can see that there are 250 recordings, 192 have been published, and 23 are still in development. Okay, we are right at time, or we have 1 minute left. Any other questions? Did we have any questions in the chat? Okay. Matt, did you want to close it out?
Yep. Jake, thanks so much for everything. I learned something new here today. Hopefully everybody did. Hopefully Barbados team, we greatly appreciate your time, and hopefully it was worth your time today to go through this with Jake. I think it's a good solution and really helpful for rolling out and updating software and bringing in new employees. So if we can help out with any follow-up questions, please send them over to Paul and the Smart Solutions team, and we'll certainly turn them around and get the answers back to everybody as quickly as we can.
And Mr. Brathwaite, per our earlier conversation, I've got some estimated pricing from Matt based on 200, end user attendees. But if you wanted me to get something more accurate for a specific number you had in mind, just let me know and I'll get with Matt and get that sorted out.
Okay, I mean, if you can send us that for now, we can finalize the numbers and get that back to you.
Okay, I'll do that.
All right, but thank you very much. That was definitely interesting. Product has a lot more functionality than I anticipated, so I think we're going to be very interested in proceeding.
But we greatly appreciate everybody's time. I know everybody's busy, and it's a busy time of the year. So thanks so much.
And
All right.
sorry, one last point. I have to throw this in, but just so you understand, there is a learning management system within the HCM suite, and that's of course closely tied to the roles. The security throughout all of CloudSuite is role-based, so those roles exist tied to jobs and positions within the HCM system. And then of course the learning management is designed to make sure that people have the training that's appropriate for their job and position / role. The actual processes that they operate within CloudSuite. So that loop is completely closed. We create that content, we assign it in the learning management system that gets tied to a job and position, which gets tied to a security role. So when somebody's onboarded and goes into a role for a specific job and position, there's all this content, including the certifications that they have to be prepared to do that job. So it's very nice how it does that.
Okay.
That was my 2 cents. Thank you for your time.
All right.
All right.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
Thank you,
very much.
everybody. Have a happy
Thank you, Jake.
holidays.
Thank you,
Thank
Jake.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.